Hi, hello, and welcome to A Pain in the Art, the podcast where we're going to be discussing a show going to Edinburgh. Today we're here with Robyn Paterson, and we're going to be discussing the South Africans, which premiered in which year did it premiere, Robyn?
It premiered in 2016.
2016, perfect. So we'll talk about how that premiered in 2016 and her upcoming show, the South Africans, the Freakin Family, which is premiering this year in Edinburgh. So, Robyn, why don't we go back to the beginning? Where did you get the idea for the South Africans?
So the South Africans actually started as a scene in another play that I wrote when I was 23. And that play was called Mooi River. And it's based on a place in South Africa called Mooi River that my grandparents live in South Africa, or lived in, because unfortunately they're not alive anymore. And Gordon and Helene, who are my parents that I play in the South Africans, they were featured in this one scene in Mooi River. And I just wrote this tiny scene like as a conversation between my parents, which I'd heard them have many times before. And as I was thinking about doing Mooi River, which I wrote as like an interactive theatre piece where audience members can move around and move through different parts of this tiny, tiny town in South Africa, I was thinking about how I would play my parents. And you don't ever see them, but you just hear them in the dark. So that had always like stayed in my mind, because I was like, I know I can impersonate them really well, and everyone can impersonate their parents to like some degree.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking in my head, I was like, yeah, like in this little bit, the audience stands in the dark and they just hear these two people talking. And I kind of got more fixated on like mimicking my parents and kind of extending this one scene in this play. And I didn't really do anything with it. I submitted it to a couple of competitions. And then in 2012, I wrote Mooi River in 2011. And then in 2012, in New Zealand, there's this very short theatre festival. It's run all over the world in different countries. And it's called the Short and Sweet Theatre Festival. Mm-hmm. And every play that's submitted has to be 10 minutes or under. And when you're an actress and you've come out of drama school and you're working, but you're not getting a lot of work, you write things or you try and find ways to showcase your abilities or get in front of the right people in order to kind of start people talking about you. So I decided I wanted to take this scene from Mooi River and extend it out to 10 minutes and play my parents, because I know I'm really good at kind of imitating and flicking between different characters in my heads, especially if I'm recreating something I've seen on TV. So I extended it out to 10 minutes and decided to put it in this theatre festival in 2012. And as I was doing it, I was making myself laugh, and the extra stuff I was writing, I enjoy writing theatre. I mean, I've been writing theatre since, 2009. I enjoy writing theatre that resonates with people. I literally feel like when you go to the theatre, you have a captive audience. They're in there in the theatre. You've like locked them in there. You may as well say something. You've got an hour and a half with them. You may as well not push an agenda, but if you're passionate about something or you want to make people think about something or feel something, why wouldn't you? I'm all for theatre that is just purely to entertain. I love it. It's a respite from the grind of everyday life. But I am a big fan of being moved by theatre, or theatre making me feel or making me think or resonating with me. Yeah, so I was really keen in turning this 10-minute piece into something that resonated, or something that resonated with me and resonated with people who came to see it. So the whole point was kind of talking about immigration and belonging as something I can resonate with, not being from New Zealand, even though I sound like it, and always having this feeling of being that piece in the puzzle that doesn't quite fit, and never really being able to find your niche in a new country. And I saw that with my parents, and I felt that growing up. And so I put it into this festival, and I was super nervous because my parents came to see it, and you're essentially just taking the piss out of your parents on stage. And it did really well, and my parents loved it, and the audience loved it, and I won Best Independent Theatre Company for the New Zealand 2012 festival. And so when I moved to Sydney, in Australia in 2014, they had the same festival. And so I rewrote it about my parents moving to Australia and decided to perform it in that festival and see how it went down with another audience, and I won Best Newcomer to the festival in 2014. So, and the feedback was so great and the reviews were so positive that part of me was like, oh, I've got something good here. Like, this is quite cool. So I moved to London in 2014. And I moved here because I wanted to put on theatre. I wanted to work internationally. I wanted to do stuff in an international setting and in an international industry. And I was producing Apple commercials for UK and Europe, which was a great job. And I still don't quite know how I got that job. But when projects didn't come in, or we weren't working on different campaigns, my boss was really great at, telling all of us in the office to fill our time with other things. There's no point pretending to work on something if we don't have any work. So I started writing the South Africans and extending it to an hour-long play, just because I really liked it and I thought it was quite funny and I enjoy impersonating my parents. And so I finished writing that at the beginning of 2015. I took my time with it, and I was having brunch with a friend at the beginning of 2016, and I said, I've refined this play. I really like this play. I'm thinking of putting it up here in London in a theatre. And he worked for Assembly, which is one of the bigger fringe venues up in Edinburgh. And he said, well, why don't you take it to Edinburgh? And instead of just dismissing the idea, I was like, why don't I take it to Edinburgh? And now I joke that was like the most expensive brunch I ever had, because it ended up in the long run costing me like 10 grand, because over pancakes that cost like £7, I ended up like taking this whole month-long campaign to Edinburgh. So that's kind of the whole like origin of it, and how the South Africans kind of now just is, and how it came to be.
So how did you find Edinburgh in comparison to the other festivals that you've done beforehand? Like, how did that differ?
Absolutely mad. It's absolutely mad.
Yeah.
And you will see it. Nothing really prepares you for it. It is, I can't even find the words. With the festivals, like the Short and Sweet Theatre festivals, you only have 10 minutes, and it's quite safe. You're kind of under the umbrella of a festival where you have this variety of different work all being performed in one night. So whether your play doesn't go down with somebody as well, somebody else will love your play and maybe not like the others. There's safety in numbers, and it's nice to feel like you're part of a program. You've been selected to be part of the festival, so you're not terrible, but there isn't any real kind of pressure to it. It's just almost like a showcase, which is quite nice. I think Edinburgh, it comes down to what your objective is. If you want to go to Edinburgh and you just want to do a week, or you just want to do 2 weeks, and it's just the showcase and just the ability to say that you went to Edinburgh, then it's brilliant. Then it's a wonderful experience. You look at the 3,500 shows that are on for the entire month. You look at the mile that is packed shoulder to shoulder with different shows, trying to advertise and bring people in and reach an audience, and you're in there, struggling with them. If you wanted to just be an experience of, being a part of it, then it's wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm not that type of person. As you know, I'm super intense. And I suffer this terrible affliction of wanting to be the best. I don't know where it comes from. It probably comes from my father. But I wanted to go to Edinburgh, and I wanted to sell out, and I wanted to win a Fringe First, and I wanted to be the show that was a runaway success. I didn't just want to be one in the crowd. And I couldn't tell you why I wanted that. But I think sometimes when you're an artist, or I think sometimes when you're creating art, you have this inane desire to create something and to make it be as good as it can be. I don't know if I'm ever satisfied with what I do, but Edinburgh to me was this pinnacle of it being the best of the best, or this huge smorgasbord of different artists coming and showing what they can do. And I wanted to be one of the great artists. I didn't want to take up something that was half-baked, or I didn't want it to just be like a showcase, because I felt like I had done that. I wanted this to affect people. I wanted people to love it. I wanted people to laugh at it. I wanted people to hate it with justification. I wanted it to spark discussion. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I hired a great team that are, coming on board for this year as well. I hired an amazing design team who've worked with Assembly, one of the venues up there, for years and years. And I hired a great publicist who's also worked in Edinburgh and knows the ropes. I put together a team of very keen, very eager individuals and wanted them to all care about it and love it as much as I do, in order for us to have this experience of being a show that could compete with the best of the best. So it was very full on, and I don't doubt that the pressure I put on it probably added to the intensity of my stress. But the response that we got from people that came to see it, like expat South Africans and women, like I had this woman who cried in the foyer, and I came out at the end and she was like, "Can you sign my program?" She like grabbed my wrist and she was like, "You've written our story. That's our story." And she was like, "That's exactly our lives. That's what we went through." And I had other people come and say how much they loved it. I had people from the Netherlands saying that, like they only understood like 50% of it because English wasn't their first language, but they got it and they were like, yes, that's like how we feel about like when we immigrated. And it wasn't just immigrants. We had a couple of school groups come through, and a couple of students had moved out of high school and moved away from their towns and gone to university, and they were like, yes, that's how we feel. We just feel like we don't know where we are, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know why we're doing it. So it was that's why I create, or why I write what I write, because it's the discussions afterwards, that's something you've put forward that stay with audience members or resonate with audience members. That has to be a fueling essence for anybody who writes or creates something, that you want to affect them in some capacity. That's the best bit about all of this. The rehearsals are tedious and everything. Other things can be super tedious. But that was such a highlight of Edinburgh back then.
So would you say that it's the success of the South Africans that led you to write the second play, which is the Freakin Family, that's coming out this year, it's premiering this year? Would you have done a sequel? Well, I know it's not being branded as a sequel, but would you have done it without that audience reaction? Like, was it something... Whereas the South Africans, you kind of felt like driven to it. The thing with doing a second show, was that more the same drive to do it, or was it purely based on the reaction that the first one got?
It's funny, isn't it? Because there are these little tiny things that people say to you or that happen to you that can just, they sit with you. Have you ever had that where somebody just says one thing to you and a year later you're still thinking of that thing, and it starts to oddly influence like what you do with your life or how you behave? And we had a reviewer called Nick that came in from the stage, and he was one of our first reviewers, and we knew the stage was one of the big publications, and I really wanted a great review from them. And Nick was amazing and gave us 4 stars, which our publicist was stoked with and we were stoked with. And at the end of his review, it said it would be great to do a Q&A or see a part 2. And that was the last line of the review. And in my head, I wouldn't say that was the driving force for it, but it really struck me, and something inside of me was like, if Nick from the stage wants to see a part 2, I should write a part 2. If there is interest enough from people going, I so want to see a part 2, I should write a part 2. I'm a big believer in terms of if you can, you must. It's how I kind of, started my own business, and it's how I try and live my life. I feel like if you have the ability to do it, or if you feel an odd intrinsic desire to do something, it's there for a reason. You shouldn't dismiss that feeling. That feeling is there for some purpose. So I kind of felt like there was just this odd little things just started dropping into my head. I wouldn't really be thinking about writing a part 2, and then I would do something, or something would happen, or I'd be around my parents, or I'd go home to New Zealand, and in my head I was like, I absolutely should put that in the next show. That needs to go in the next show. Or they'd say something and I'd be like, that would be hilarious. So things started happening and started building up like bricks in a wall, that suddenly I had the outline or this odd shape of a second show. And it was Nick's writing in that review that asked for a part 2 that just kind of kept the desire going. And then also, I mean, we've been touring, and the responses from the festivals that we've been performing in, the responses from different audiences all around the world, it just solidified that interest, that it was there for it.
How did you approach writing the second one? Was it just from like snippets of conversations? Because obviously, without going into too much detail, something kind of big happens at the end of the first one.
Yeah.
And how were you going to approach that? Is that an issue at all, or?
Well, the second show is not really a sequel. The only kind of similarities is that Gordon and Helene are in the second one as well.
Yeah.
So the characters are reoccurring. And there are nods and little, Easter eggs in the second one that give a nod to the original South Africans. But in saying that, it is a completely separate show and it does deal with completely different issues. So I've gotten around the bombshell, I suppose, if you want to say that, in the first show by addressing it and then, moving quite swiftly on. It isn't really an issue. But the second show has been like an odd bane of my existence. I feel like when you create or when you write or when you have an idea for something along the lines of it being creative, the best work you do is when you don't think of it. It's really visceral, and it comes from feeling your way through it, or just it materializing when you're not really trying. When you try to create something, that's when you get wound up in like creative knots, and I have these temper tantrums of where I write something and then I'll get up and I'll rehearse it and I'll just be like, this is rubbish, and I just get all frustrated and I just tie myself into massive knots and I don't know what to do, and I get so angry because I'm trying so hard, which is so paradoxical, because the more that I try and do it or make myself be creative, the more I find it just doesn't work. There was my wonderful friend Amy, who will be on another episode of A Pain in the Art, was telling me the story about this artist or this author, and I can't remember. This is going to be a terrible story because I can't remember the details of it. But she was talking about genius as external. There's this creative who believed that your creativity came from a force that's external of you. It's like a creative an external genius. And he would describe it as, when you're driving, or when you're not thinking about anything, and suddenly you'll have this idea about a creative project that you've been thinking about for ages, and it comes out of nowhere, and you're like, yes, that is exactly what I need, or like, yes, that's the answer to this problem that I've been having with it. And he used to talk to this idea because he likened it to almost like a ghost. The external genius inhabits you, and he'd say to it, he'd be like, don't leave me. I'm driving, I'm going to write you down, or I'm going to flesh you out, but please, don't, stay with me. I know that you're there. He would try and keep these ideas with him until he could get it down, or until he could verbalize it or put it into whatever he was doing. And I found that with this second one, because it didn't just evolve. I mean, from the South Africans from where it started in 2011 till 2016, it was 5 years. I kind of didn't really try to create it. It just kind of came in little ideas, and that's why the show is, in a way, little vignettes all linked together, but different stories all kind of making up this one big story. And the second show is a lot more linear. And so I would force myself to sit down and I would write, and I kind of would get the gist of what I was trying to say, and I would listen to certain music and I'd just try and write without thinking in order to let that flow, or let it kind of come out, and the essence of what I'm trying to get across or what I'm trying to affect people with, allow that to come through. And I thought I had it, but now I'm in the throes of rehearsal, and I mean, it's the beginning of March at the minute. I've only learned half of it, and I'm up every day trying to just get it underneath my belt. But I find what I've written is now stale, and it's not what I'm trying to say. And I get myself into these creative tantrums of feeling it being so inorganic, and I hate it. I hate what I'm doing. So I'm almost rewriting the whole show as I'm getting up as these different characters and rehearsing it and moving between all four of them and trying to figure out the essence of exactly what I'm trying to get across and exactly what I'm trying to say to the audience in terms of, I've felt this, and in some level I know you have too, and how awful is it, or how wonderful is that, or how awkward is this to feel X, Y, and Z. And so it's really different to the first one, and I have to say I'm super struggling with it. But it's when you're in it and it's coming and it's creative and it's wonderful, then it's worth it. But it's wading through all of the rubbish to try and actually get to that thing at the essence at the bottom of it.
I suppose it's because the second one's based around a birthday party. I suppose that makes it a lot easier to be linear with that, because it's literally like you follow the hours in a day rather than the days in a year, if that makes sense. So I know the first one, it's not really clear when they move. Like, it's not as if like someone comes up with a sign, it's like, oh, 6 months later they just up and go. So I suppose maybe in that way, on one hand, like in terms of linear narrative, it's like more restricted in that. I suppose you don't really have the creative freedom because you're in one place, you can't really move, and more characters, again, that sort of is like less room for you to wiggle around in, really, and like for things to happen organically, because there's not really like many small private spaces in a house, and if they're all in there, like...
it's playing 4 characters in the second one as opposed to the 2. It's trying to flesh each of them out, so you don't hate any of them and you can resonate in some aspects with all of them. That was my biggest fear in creating this, and my biggest fear in creating the South Africans, because it's based on my parents' immigration from South Africa to New Zealand, and my biggest fear was looking like a blonde 20-something-year-old playing a heterosexual South African 65-year-old couple, that the illusion just wouldn't be there. That was my biggest fear. My biggest fear in playing, because I know now, and the audience reaction has erased that fear that I can't be convincing. My biggest fear in this one is that you will take sides, and I don't want you to take sides in this fourth one. It is all based around the ideas of happiness and growing up and losing certain relationships in order to make you happy, and readjusting your idea of happiness as you get older, and finding that the things that made you happy when you were younger, you aren't able to do those things now at a later stage in your life. So how can you readjust in order to be happy? How do you grieve what you have lost in terms of relationships with certain people, or abilities or opportunities that you thought you used to have, or things that you could do that you now can't? And how do you move forward and kind of adapt in order to be happy? And it all comes from things in my life, and losing relationships with people that were so important to me, and realizing that the more you grow up, you enter different phases of your life, and things that made you happy when you were 24 don't make you happy now at 31. Or things that you were able to do for older people out there, were you able to do when you were in your 30s, now that you can't do now that you're in your late 60s. So it's all based around those kinds of ideas. And I think because there are a lot of ideas in the second one of women choosing between families and careers, or older people grappling with the ideas of not being able to do what they used to do, and what that means for them in terms of getting into the later years of their life. I don't want anybody to dislike any of the other characters. It's really important to me that everybody sees everyone and why they've chosen what they've chosen, and identify and see themselves in each individual. And I think because, like you say, it is in real time, and it is all set around Gordon's 70th birthday, and it is all set around like an evening at a dinner party. As much as it's a comedy, it is very difficult to have these things come to fruition organically, and have these themes there that everybody can identify with almost straight away because the show's only an hour, but without it being a pushy agenda and without me as an artist going, this is what I want to say and this is what you should take away from it, and do you know, like, it's a very...
Goodbye now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I really don't want it to be very, Brechtian style. You know how Bertolt Brecht was like, this is my political message, and I don't want you to not get caught up in the illusion. I want you to go away and think about communism and think about this.
Maybe we're not going for Verstendumstrom effect in this.
Yeah.
But, like, we're all good.
Yeah, we really don't want to do, like, Mother Courage, the South Africans #2. Like, I really don't want that. I want it to be just there.
Yeah.
And people can love the story and identify with all of these 4 characters that I am playing, but take away what they want from it.
I think one thing I found interesting is that you decided to play 2 sisters. Was there ever any discussion to see if, like, one could be a brother and a sister, or would that have been too hard, or was that not what you wanted to explore?
If I'm to be completely honest, the sisters are based on myself and my best friend. It was my relationship with her is one of the most important in my life, and I adore her. And the older we get, the more we've found we make different choices in our lives in terms of what makes us happy. I'm not overly maternal. I mean, I like kids and I think they're great. She's wanted to be a mother since she was 16. And it is the sisters, first of all, it's easier to play twins because I look... I was just gonna say I look similar, but I mean it's me playing 4 characters, so of course I look similar. That was a stupid thing to say. It's easier to make the sisters girls and to make them twins because it's me playing 4. It's easier to, when you are playing 4 and you do want them and you're having conversations in real time. And I think in the first show I switch I think 320 times between Gordon and Helene. In this show, it will be up. My switches will probably in the hour be around about 500 because you are having conversations between all 4 of them at once, and needing to be very authentic and honest and full in playing 4 different characters. To try and play a male is just mentally something I really just don't have. I think time in a way, and I don't know if I have the confidence to try and adapt to playing a young male. But the relationship between Kelly and Rachel, and the sisters, in this play, it really does come down to myself and my best friend, and the choices we've made in our lives, and the choices you make in terms of engaging in relationships with people who might not make you feel how you want to feel, or people who might not see eye to eye with your choices, and how difficult that is when one of you so wants the relationship and the other, in order to be happy and to create a life that fulfills them, might not find any value in that relationship anymore. How do you navigate that when one so wants it and the other doesn't have that same importance into it? It can be so, I've felt it can be so heartbreaking, but what do you do? And so it's kind of that thing again of, it comes back to these choices of being happy. Do you accept it now for the new relationship of what it is, or do you not have it at all? And trying to figure out how to accept that.
How to balance it also, I suppose.
Yeah.
Slightly off topic, but so
nothing's off topic.
Well, I understand playing a young man would be like quite challenging. You are switching up a lot. When you were becoming Helene and Gordon, did you find a certain character easier? Or, I mean, obviously the voice of Gordon is something to behold, and I wouldn't expect anything that deep to come out from you, but...
it's really strange.
Yeah, I know, it is.
Yeah, no,
it's something.
I tell you, I can only talk like this because I had bronchitis when I was 20. Yeah, and it damaged my vocal cords. This is the only reason I can talk like this. It's very strange.
Silver linings.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's weird.
Yeah. So did you find that easier being Gordon or easier being Helene?
Initially, it's easier to be Helene because my mum is amazing and she is just so one of a kind that to impersonate her, and honest to God, you say you don't want to turn out like your mother. You do. Everybody turns out like their mother, you know? Initially it was way easier playing my mum and imitating her. And I found way more joy in it. My father it's very similar, the voice that I can do, and the character, that kind of the posture and his opinions on things, and is very different to my actual father. And it's great to hear the response from my parents' friends. I've got some ladies that are like, you know, you really like have given your father a hard time. Hey? He's really not that grumpy. And I'm like, yeah, I know that my dad's not that grumpy, but it's my parents' friends like love how much I've made Gordon like a really grumpy old man. So his character is probably as far away from as he's probably the most different from real life Gordon as opposed to the show Gordon. But I found that the more I do it, possibly because in my old ripe age of 31, I've become more angry and bitter in my life. I don't know if it's just London that makes me like irritated and angry all the time, but I find Gordon gets like, as I grow up and get angrier, Gordon gets like angrier and angrier. So like I found like now that I've been doing the South Africans for 3 years, Gordon's really easily accessible. Like I can play a grumpy old man in like the blink of an eye. But both of them I find really like easy to access. A young male, I wrote my very first solo show back in 2010, and it was called Introducing Anna, and it was back, I had just come out of drama school, and it was about like an Australian Denny's waitress who is a terrible prostitute by night. And so it was, and up until about 2 nights before opening night, I was playing this unwitting neighbor who had come round to borrow some keys because he couldn't get into his apartment, and he was coming to get some keys, and she thinks he's like her client, so she's like trying to strip for him and all of this. It's my very first solo show, and I was playing both of them. And about 2 nights before opening night, I went, I'm not playing them. It doesn't feel real. And my director, I remember, was so annoyed because she had gone off to Australia for a holiday and came back, and I had just changed the entire show to like a monologue as opposed to flicking between these 2 characters. And if anything, I think that's stuck in my head. I don't feel confident playing a young male, playing my father as stereotypically as what I am, because it's heightened, and both of them are heightened. It's very caricaturic, if that's a word. I feel comfortable doing that, whereas I don't know how to make there's nothing that hooks me in there. And also I really want to explore that dynamic between 2 females.
So, as you mentioned, you hired a team for the first Edinburgh show, and this year it seems you've expanded it slightly. What was your like choice in that? Was it just just explain that for me, please.
I will. I will, Lila. I found taking a team, there's just absolutely no way that you can go to Edinburgh on your own doing a solo show. You can, but you are just going to get lost in the crowd. It will just swallow you up. Like I say, you run the Royal Mile, there's 3,500 shows. And if it's just you trying to make your voice heard, there's just no way you'll get. The average audience is 6 people a night, and if you go on your own, you're probably going to get that. My intent in taking 4 other people up with me in 2016 was I wanted the show to be great. And not only that, I really wanted to form a company where I could give people the opportunity to come into the professional realm and start learning on the job of what it takes to build a show from scratch. Like I say, I've kind of been born with this terrible affliction to try and be like the best, or try and, be great at what I do. And when I was around people who were in a similar vein to me, I found it really inspiring, and I wanted to be like them. And a lot of my friends who are actors on shows back in New Zealand, I have a lot of respect for them and the dedication and the hard work that they put in, not just to acting, but to making themselves the best they can, whether it's They're just always at the ready. The best actors I know are physically great, are vocally great. They're in voice classes, they're in movement classes, they're in acting classes, they're at the gym. They don't treat themselves with the idea of if it's going to happen for me, but they treat it with the idea of when it's going to happen for me. And when I was working for Apple and I was producing commercials, I worked with a great team, and my boss was really inspiring. And this was before I went in 2016. I really looked at my boss in massive admiration. It was the first time I'd ever worked in like a 9 to 5, because when you're an actress and you're in your 20s, you work hospitality and you work nights and you work shift work. And it was the first time I'd worked in an office in Soho in London, and she was the epitome of efficiency. She just got things done, and she didn't sacrifice her sense of self or make anybody feel bad. And I know that I'm still working on that. I do absolutely let my stress get to me, and I know that I get overwhelmed very easily. But I would love to be like her. And I wanted to give people the opportunity to come on board. And the thing I say is, like, this is your show. I've written it and I perform it, but this is your credit. And with you, I said to my team in 2016, I was like, this is your platform to see how it's done, and do it for yourself. The more that you put yourself in it and take it on as your baby, you organically will start to care about it and therefore take proactive action in order to elevate it to the next level. Because when I saw that my boss really cared about what we were doing, I wanted to do it for her. And once I started actually caring about of course, I mean, God, you have to care when you work in a situation like that. But I really wanted to do great work, not just for the company and not just for the client, but for her, because I really cared about the team and I cared about us doing great work. Because if I could do great work on this campaign, the next campaign I knew I could do better. So the team in 2016 was great. And my respect for them and my appreciation for them is still to this day paramount. They were on the mile for 5 hours a day with me flying. They never once complained. If we got rained on, they laughed. We made jokes. They were in rehearsals. They set up websites. They set up, crowdfunders. They were so brilliant. And I knew this year I can't do it on my own. There's just absolutely no way. You know that saying of it takes a village? I wanted to form a village. And of course, when you do something again, you know what works and you know what doesn't. So you try and be really clear and set the boundaries of kind of not even boundaries. You're very upfront. I'm very upfront with what I want. And I'm very upfront with the objective. And I'm very upfront with how much I care about this. And I think caring is great, but I think I am still very much learning how to be a good leader, and learn how not to let my pressure that I put on myself infiltrate relationships with people in the team. You know this. You're on my team, and you know my messages in the WhatsApp group sometimes are very abrupt, and so I'll put in a lot of like kissing emojis to be like, I'm not a total bitch. Please help me. Yeah, it's something I'm everybody's still working on it.
Yeah.
It's very hard sometimes to really care about something, and you so want somebody else to care as much as you do. But without it becoming I don't know,
fixation almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or an obsession.
Yeah, because without a doubt it's so clear how much you care about South Africans. And even when I was working with your students, the first word they used to describe you was passionate. And of course that's really sweet and really good to know, but I think definitely it's so clear from like when we meet you how much this show means to you, and it definitely does infiltrate back into us, like that we want to make this good for you as well, but also like for us. And
can I ask, how do you feel about coming on as a producer in your first kind of out of university semi-professional setting?
I'm finding it a bit daunting, I'm not gonna lie. It's definitely nerve-wracking. But again, like it's such an opportunity, and if I ever not that I do, but if I'm always like, oh God, are you ready for this? Like, oh, can you do all this? Or especially in the last few weeks where it has been relentless for me. Like, oh God. But it's just whenever I'm like, oh, maybe I don't want to do this. I think definitely seeing the show, the first one, that really like picked me back up in sense of motivation. It's only because I had like a lot on with uni, and I remember seeing the show and I was like, that's what I'm doing it for. And that's it. And it just felt so rewarding just seeing the show that I was like, when we take it to Edinburgh, that's going to be like 100 times better. And we would have worked for it and it's going to be amazing. And that's always just what I keep with me if I'm ever like, oh God, I haven't done this at like the last minute. I'm like, shit. And then, or if I'm panicking and I'm like, oh, what if this doesn't go well? And it's just like, okay, just think about that. And you have a goal and you have an end date. It's fine. Like, it's going to be fine. It's, you know, we're floating, not sinking. Like, do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
and the only way, like I said to you before we started recording, I think of it as a carousel. The carousel's going round, and it's almost like jumping onto a moving carousel. You kind of find yourself looking at it and kind of almost trying to time of when you can jump and get into it. And it was like that when I started producing. People are using words I've never even heard. You don't know if you are doing it right. You don't know if you're creating more problems. You don't know if you are, you just don't know. You feel almost paralyzed. But it is why I kind of said, the more that you just kind of get yourself informed and just always know what's going on, suddenly you find you're on it, you're on the carousel, and suddenly everything's coming to you and you know exactly what everyone's talking about. And you, like you said to me before, you guys informed me of dates that they'd just gone over my head. You know what's going on, and then you feel really, really capable. But it absolutely is daunting, and I think I'm very aware of it. And that's why I think I'm trying, like I say, I'm not unaware of letting my overwhelmingness, because it is the initial stages. This is our first podcast. We're still in March. We still have to go till August. It's all the setup, you know, and you're absolutely right. When you feel like you've worked for it and you feel like it's there, Edinburgh was the most exhausting but rewarding thing I've ever done. And I can only imagine taking 2 shows this year and performing them, you know, on alternating nights for the full entire month. Is at the end of it, it's going to be amazing. It's going to just be incredible. There's no way it can't be, you know. It's foolproof, guys. It's foolproof. Yeah. No, I think it's going to be great. And so, Libby, you're sitting over there in the corner, also coming on as a producer. How do you feel as well about coming on and working in this sense?
I'm really excited. I've always loved theatre, especially as a kid. I did a lot of drama when I wasn't in school. I was kind of getting myself involved in everything that I could to do with theatre. And growing older, I kind of decided to go more behind the scenes and down the technical routes of film instead. So to be able to come on board this project and work from behind the scenes and do the kind of the technical stuff and kind of get the best of both while also immersing myself in the theatre side is really exciting.
I always thought, like, I'm sort of similar to you. I grew up with a lot of theatre, and I think as I did like Lambda exams, all that.
Yeah, Lambda.
Oh, Lambda exams. And I kind of drifted away from it because I thought, oh, I'm more suited to like the technical side or the running things side. And it's just, especially like the last year or so, I've kind of been like wandering back to theatre and being like, oh, maybe should I have like done that or focus on theatre rather than film and television. And this is just like the perfect opportunity.
What have you found the most difficult in this month of initially getting everything up and running?
I think for me personally, just based on this time of the year, the hardest thing for me has been balancing this with uni. And I think for me, one of my personal faults that I'm working on is making realistic deadlines for myself. So I feel like this has really helped me going to the profession I want to go into, having this time now to realise that actually I need to set myself realistic goals to be able to get things done to when they need to be. It's been a really kind of challenging but kind of in the long term rewarding aspect to get out of it.
I mean, you are looking at like 2 girls who in January did their essays the day before it was due, so you are welcome.
Don't mention that.
We loved that evening.
What about you, Lilo? What's the most difficult thing you found?
I think it's again just keeping my head above the water. I think because as a person, I know I like stress out, and I know that I can kind of like clock out in my head sometimes if I get so focused on a current project, or even like with the essay we were doing it like even though it was last minute, I was so just like tunnel vision. It's got to be done. Like I'm well aware I get tunnel vision, and when that's the thing I'm focusing on, it's great, and I'll like completely throw myself into it. But it's just finding that balance, I think, and I think that's just in like most aspects. It's just finding the balance of like, and if I have time to do the podcast, time to like promote the show, but also I'm currently doing my own fundraising, and I'm also doing my own shoot, my own paperwork, own casting, and it's just been trying to balance that. And then it's just like having a life and like having family. It's like, okay, just got to stop tunnel visioning so much, because at the minute, whenever I like think about Edinburgh, I only think about being in Edinburgh. I'm like, okay, like it's Edinburgh, like that's Edinburgh time, when it's like you've got to be working up for it the whole time as well. So it's just aware of just trying to like balance communication and being aware of what everyone else is doing rather than like shutting myself off. I'd say that's what I've found the most daunting.
Yeah, it is just, it's really, I think it's like anything in life. I think especially when you are working or you're doing something creative, it's really difficult to work in a sense. Like everybody finds teething problems. It's like anything. It's like if you go into rehearsals for a show, and actors work differently to how you work, or the director works differently or uses different directing ways. Everybody has those teething problems of needing to adjust or, you know, shift themselves. You know, if you can imagine in a physical sense, everyone's trying to like fit on a couch, and everyone's like kind of just adjusting themselves and moving over and creating room for each other. It is really difficult in the beginning, but I think it's just like that carousel I'm talking about. Like once you find the rhythm, or once you find the pattern, or once we're in it, and you know to expand that vision from, oh, Edinburgh is actually from now up until the end of August and possibly beyond in terms of touring. I mean, I'm going to Scotland on Wednesday to go and pitch at the Scottish Federation of Theatre, and I have face-to-face meetings all day Thursday with touring networks who buy the show, and then you do UK touring. We're touring New Zealand at the end of the year for 6 weeks. One of the producers, you know, on the team is going with me, and for 6 weeks we will go top to bottom of New Zealand. And that's because I pitched the show at a market day last year. It's once you realize that this, you make room for it, or once you kind of shuffle things around in your life in order to not necessarily put everything else on hold like you're saying and make this a priority, but make this something that must be done, and can't be done at a later date but needs to be done at this time and in this place, then it just kind of, you just make room for it, or it makes room for itself in your life. I find that because, as you know, I run my own business, and then as well as that, I'm, you know, rehearsing this show, and then I'm writing this show, and then I'm obviously touring, and then I'm flying back to New Zealand to perform in festivals, and I have to fly back for a premiere in 2 weeks' time, and like you say, trying to have a life on top of that. Well, I don't. You know, I go to the gym, and that's my like social time. I am trying to find that balance as well, and make room for friends, and make room for relationships, which right now aren't priorities, but to have a balance, I totally understand. But it is just that I think everybody's facets of their life, some aspects just take up more room than others, and it's all about just trying to maybe condense one aspect in order to make room and make time for another. But you're right, Libby, this is absolutely like you're saying, it is just something going, you know, like something happens and you going, yeah, actually you're right, I absolutely have to make sure that this is done now, because it is, that's something I found when I was producing. I would say something and my boss would be like, great, so where's that thing? But like I said, we're all working on different aspects, and this is why I think communication's so important in a team aspect, because everybody is working on their own things. And like I said to you in the initial interviews, it's always business, because everyone's still kind of trying to find their feet and be as good as they can be in their roles. So yeah, but I'm like, in saying that, I'm really super happy with my team. Like, I like dig the shit out of you guys. Yeah, and I dig the shit out of like everyone, and just even like seeing the numbers go up on social media, and the GoFundMe campaign is now live. So please, my God, if you want to donate, the link will be on underneath here. Please feel free to click on the link and donate, please, my God. But just seeing all of the stuff now coming to, we're on it now. Like, we're on the journey, and the draft posters are now coming through, and the first podcast is being recorded, and the audience reaction videos are up. It's great. It's great to start seeing the bricks in the wall being built up.
And it's come at a really great time for us because, I mean, they're kicking us out. Well, I say kicking us out. We're graduating in a few months. We've got to leave the nest. So to be able to kind of, after 3 years of kind of, we're going to be out on our own. So to put all our efforts into something after graduation, to kind of keep ourselves busy, it's going to be, I think, graduating is going to be less of a sting for, I don't know about you, but I'm really sad about graduating. So to be able to go to Edinburgh and do something really exciting and put all my kind of energy towards that, it's been, a really good opportunity, and makes graduating a little less
painful,
I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a pretty nice natural way to stop. Thank you so much for chatting with us, Robyn, and thank you, Libby, for popping in at the end and for setting this all up. You're a gem. And yeah, so this has been episode 1 of A Pain in the Art, where we've spoken about the South Africans and the Freakin Family. And hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks when we're going to be discussing marketing and management. Bye-bye.
Bye.